breakup and fragmentation. And the second, of course, is the Argentine Jesuit Pope, who comes to the seat of St. Peter in 2013 with a very profound discernment about the spiritual conversion to which humanity is called right now in what he calls, and Anna's used the phrase already, the change of era, el cambio de época. So this understanding that we are not just in an era of change, but if you like, there's a gear shift brought about by technology, that we are moving from one era to another. And this has profound implications. History is full of these hinge moments and transitions, and they're always very difficult. They're very difficult to navigate because they involve the death and breakup of what we are familiar with and the coming of something new and a disorientation. So both Bauman and Francis identify this as essentially a dark time, because it's dark because we can't see ahead, but it's also dark because the forces of disaggregation seem to be dominant, seem to have, if you like, the last word. They hold sway. So Bauman, having written this extraordinary number of books, but all really around the same idea, towards the end of his life, is I think it's fair to say, Zega, growing in a kind of despair. He's looking at the world and he cannot see ahead. But then, after Francis's election, he becomes captivated by the Pope and his vision. And he starts to see him as the source of hope. And it's interesting to say why he sees him as the source of hope. I think it's both, and Zega brings this out really well, both because Francis articulates the humanism that we need, the spiritual conversion that we need. Above all, Bauman is deeply impacted by the 2016 speech which Pope Francis gives in the Charlemagne Prize, the European Prize speech, where he articulates this humanism. So that's one. But the second thing that Bauman is really impressed by with Francis is the fact that Francis actually has concrete ways, proposals, methods, processes of, as Bauman would put it, turning word into flesh. And this is quite significant from an intellectual, because as you know, intellectuals, and I'm sure we're all good at it, are good at this. You know, there's a lot of talk. Politicians are particularly good at using high-sounding ideas that make us feel good. What Pope Francis calls, I really like the phrase, declarational nominalism. In other words, it tells you what, you know, it makes you feel good because he's articulating something, but nothing actually changes. And if you like, politics itself, language, academe has become more and more liquid. It's become more and more Gnostic, self-referential, detached, abstract, and so on. So what impresses Bauman is that Francis not only, as it were, walks the walk and talks the talk, but he actually does things that bring about the change which Bauman thinks is necessary. So it's quite a remarkable kind of meeting of these two people and these two minds. And as already been said, Francis before 2017 hadn't read any Bauman, but they have this meeting in Assisi. And by the way, today I was talking to Matteo Bruni, who's the director of the Holy See Press Office and also a member of Sant'Egidio, and he was there when
he's in that picture.
That's it. Okay. So he's translating when, at this famous moment in Assisi in 2016, Bauman says to Francis, yeah, I see you as the light at the end of a tunnel. And Francis says, nobody's ever called me a tunnel before. And Bauman says, yes, but you're the light at the end of it. Anyway, Matteo was, knowing I was coming here tonight, was telling me about that moment, and he said that the light was sort of shining in Bauman's eyes like a child, you know, when he actually finally got to meet Francis, and Zega brings out really well, you know, just how that meeting came about and just how excited Bauman was by it. So I love this book, and I've been very involved with Zega over the years in the writing of it, and he of course makes wonderful use of my books and of Letters to Dream in it. And so I don't want to kind of go over anything, it's all in the book, but just to congratulate you on a really nutritious, accessible text that actually models, I think, the kind of dialogue which you're talking about, because it brings us into the mind and heart of Bauman and into the mind and heart of Francis and shows how they resonate with each other. Now, what I'm going to do, I won't keep you long, but I want to sort of take this on a bit by going beyond 2020, which is when Letters Dream was written. But also to bring in another sociologist, and I'm sorry you've heard a lot of names tonight of academics you've probably never heard of. I'll give you another one, why not? Helmut Rosser, a German sociologist, some of you are nodding, whose book in 2016 was called Resonance. And I think the idea of resonance is, I think, really powerful as a sort of complement. If Bauman has diagnosed liquid modernity, I think Rosser's idea of resonance as a response to alienation and liquid modernity, I think is very helpful. And then to sort of connect this idea of resonance with a theme with which Anna and I are very familiar, which is the Synod, because we were both very involved in it, particularly last month. So, and just briefly, resonance, before I tell you what resonance he means by resonance, what he's identifying is very similar to what Bauman identifies, but Rosser puts this big emphasis on the speed at which everything is happening, what he calls acceleration. And the word rapidification, a horrible, ugly word, appears in Laudato Si, which is really expressing the same idea. So three types of acceleration: technical, because all this is driven by technology, acceleration of social change, the breakup of society and of institutions brought about by technical development, and acceleration in the pace of life. And you're probably all very familiar with this. The idea that we always have to move further, faster, more, just simply to keep up. There's this sense that we're on a hamster, like hamsters on those wheels, that have to keep turning even though we're not actually going anywhere. And this is a powerful idea in Rosser's book, that modernity, the promise of modernity, is always holding out the promise of having more, of increasing, speeding up, expanding our possibilities, so that one day we will reach this place, a kind of golden age, where somehow we have it. And young people, and I think you know what I'm talking about here, you're constantly told, aren't you, you need to, work out your life and know what you want to do and put in place everything you need in order somehow to get to this place where you're supposed to get to. And the truth is you never really do get there, because what happens is you get caught up in forces that are beyond your control. You're, in a sense, dominated by these forces of acceleration, which increasingly desensitize you to each other, to God and to the world. So this is what one might call alienation, liquid modernity, acceleration, all produces this kind of non-belonging, a non-belonging, which is endlessly analysed in this sociology of modernity. But the other interesting thing that happens is that as we get caught up in this, we increasingly embrace what in Laudato Si is called the technocratic paradigm. It's a kind of Promethean idea that we must dominate more and more the world in which we are in. So there's this idea of constantly exploiting, consuming, grabbing, having. It's the completely opposite of the logic of gift to which we're invited in true religion. So that's just his analysis, which I think you'll recognise as very similar to Bauman's. And what he says about resonance is this: if acceleration is the problem, then resonance might be the solution. Now, the vital idea of resonance is it's a bit like a tuning fork. If you tap it, the tuning fork will reflect or pick up on the vibrations in the atmosphere. So it's the idea of an encounter in which I experience a transformation of myself by opening myself to the other or another. This can be in music, it can be in art, it can be, of course, the experience of love itself, and all religion. Religion in its true sense is an experience of resonance which produces in us the desire to go back and search for it again and again. Experiences of truth, of beauty, of goodness, which transform us. And the point is this, that his idea is that there are certain ways we can live, rituals, mindsets, things we can do, which enhance our capacity for resonance. If you like, dispositions of resonance, and that includes very much rituals and so on. Anyway, I think it's interesting research, and it gives us another kind of a narrative in which to talk about what Bauman is identifying. So let me just put it like this: if Rosser's right, and the cultivation of resonance is the key instrument or thing that we need to, if you like, counter the forces of rapidification of liquid modernity, then the question is, how can we develop that resonance? And just to give one example of the absence of resonance increasingly in a technified society, it's in the area of work, which is, of course, an area of deep concern to Pope Francis and for Bauman. Essentially, more and more people have, and people have written about this, there's a book called Crap Jobs, where people actually have jobs and work which is simply meaningless. They are driven constantly by pressure. They have no real connection, there's no creativity and so on. So that would be a good example of how resonance, if you like, technification drives out resonance. But then think about the kind of work which would be resonant, is the kind of work in which people engage, which involves creating where you're part of what you're doing helps you to grow and so on. So that's just to give you a general idea. So how can we develop, if you like, resonance? And here I want to just bring in now Pope Francis and indeed all true religion. Religare, religion, means to reconnect. And of course when we're reconnecting, what we're doing is we're opening ourselves. In prayer, we're opening ourselves, we're making a cry of the human heart. There's a longing there. And the response of true religion, in a way, is to reassure us that there is a response, that we are heard, that God understands us, and that therefore that resonance can happen, that relationship can happen. So if you think about what Francis does from the very beginning, is to tell us who God is and how God responds to us, a God of mercy, who is patient, who always forgives, who is just waiting to enter into a relationship with us. So from the beginning of the pontificate, I want to suggest that this could be a very interesting key way of explaining this pontificate. From the very beginning, Francis challenging everything in our own religion and in our church which undermines our capacity for resonance. So rigidity, fundamentalism, ideologies, what he calls indietrismo, kind of traditionalism, any kind of self-sufficiency, anything which closes us in on ourselves. He has really gone out very straightforwardly to combat and to identify as the temptation, while at the same time offering us, calling us into actions and processes that are all about our capacity for resonance. So to develop our resonance with fundamentally the three core key relationships of our lives, with God, with our Creator, with the natural world, with creation, and with our fellow creatures. And those, of course, are the three key teaching documents of this pontificate: Evangelii Gaudium, Restitutum Laudato Si, and Fratelli Tutti. So to call us into a greater resonance, so that we are capable of resonance with the opening up, if you like, so that there is a vibration increasingly between the other, the world, natural world, God and other people, and us. And just a last point on synodality. And this really just came to me reflecting on this book and reading a bit of Alma Grossa. The assembly that Anna and I were very involved in last month here in Rome used a core basic technique which has become known really as the synodal method par excellence, and it's called conversation in the spirit. So rather than having a debate or a discussion, what you do is you begin in silence, in prayer, and then everybody in the group, there were 11 in each group, everybody speaks for 4 minutes. You don't respond, there's no discussion, you're listening very, very deeply. Then there's more silence, where what you're doing is paying attention to the resonance, and that is the word they use, the resonance in your own hearts of what you have heard. And then in the second round you articulate that, and then in the third round you can then have a kind of a freer discussion. But the reason I flagged this is that people were transformed by using this method. Okay, they came out and said, this is amazing. Even when I really disagree with somebody, I understand them. I can see things from their point of view. I might still disagree with them, but they have challenged me, they have helped me grow, they have changed my perspective. It's a really wonderful example of how discussion itself, dialogue, the very idea at the heart of this book, can be transformed by a method which opens us to resonance. So that's really was all I wanted to contribute, was just to think about where this book ends, which is sort of COVID and let us dream. In fact, there's a story that comes afterwards, which is the story of the Synod on Synodality, which one might say is the greatest ever experiment in human history of self-transcendence, of resonance, of inviting the entire church great parts of humanity into newly resonant relationships, which will enable us to navigate this change of era, which will enable us to contest the forces of liquid modernity and emerge better and stronger and more solid as a result. Thank you.